Night has a way of hiding the things we'd rather not look at. But some machines refuse to disappear into the dark. They were built to be seen, even when the world around them was falling apart. This is the story of the Mercedes Benz 500K and 540K, pre-war supercharged monuments to speed, status, and power. In a decade shaped by depression, political theater, and the first concrete ribbons of the Autobahn, these cars rolled out of Stuttgart like rolling declarations of intent. While many great luxury marques were dying, downsizing, or clinging to life, Mercedes Benz chose a different path. It built heavier, faster, more extravagant machines, long-hooded giants with hidden strength under their sculpted fenders. Beneath the chrome and leather sat independent suspension, a supercharged straight 8, and a drivetrain designed to cruise the new German motorways at speeds most drivers could barely imagine. Tonight, in the Car Story Vault, we open the file marked Mercedes Benz 500K. We'll follow these cars from glittering motor shows and Berlin boulevards into the shadows of politics and war, and then forward again into the bright lights of modern auction tents where a single special roadster can bring millions under the hammer. So settle in, let the sound of the rain and the distant growl of a supercharger pull you back to the mid-1930s, to an era when Mercedes-Benz built cars so extravagant that even the night couldn't swallow them whole. The story of the 500K and 540K doesn't begin with Mercedes at all. It begins with a crash, the Wall Street crash of 1929. Across the Atlantic, the Great Depression reshaped the map of luxury motoring. Bentley went into receivership, Duesenberg and Hispano-Suiza were fading, and even Rolls-Royce had to tread carefully. The market for giant hand-built status symbols shrank almost overnight. Germany's path was different. By the early and mid-1930s, economic reforms and rearmament spending had pulled parts of the country out of the worst of the slump. At the same time, a new regime understood the value of spectacle, grand architecture, stadiums, parades, and cars that could project power from the back seat as well as from behind the wheel. Mercedes-Benz was perfectly positioned. It already had a reputation forged on the racetracks of the 1920s with brutal SSS and SSK models. Now, it would take that heritage and wrap it in something even more expensive, more refined, and more politically useful: a new breed of supercharged luxury cars. In 1934, at the Berlin Motor Show, Mercedes-Benz pulled the cover off the 500K, K for compressor. It wasn't just a new model, it was a statement. Under the long hood sat a 5-liter straight 8, breathing through twin carburetors and a Roots-type supercharger. Driven gently, it made around a 100 horsepower, but pushed the throttle to the floor and a mechanical howl joined the exhaust note as the supercharger engaged, boosting output to roughly 160 horsepower and pushing this 2-ton monument past 160 kilometers per hour. For the mid-1930s, that kind of performance in such a heavy, opulent car was astonishing. It wasn't a racer, it was a high-speed drawing room on wheels. Independent suspension, with double wishbones in front and a swing axle rear, gave it better comfort and handling than the old SSK generation, at least on smooth roads. But the numbers tell only half the story. The real theater happened when the driver buried the throttle and the compressor cut in. For a few moments, fuel consumption spiked, mechanical stress climbed, and the 500K lunged forward with a surge that must have felt like cheating physics. This was overboost decades before turbocharged brochures used the word. Only a few hundred 500Ks were built, on multiple wheelbases and with a small catalog of body styles: sedans, cabriolets, roadsters, and streamlined motorway courier designs. Each one cost a fortune, and each one announced its owner as someone the average German would only ever see passing by. 2 years later, in 1936, Mercedes did what engineers almost always do when given time and money. They made it bigger and stronger. The result was the 540K. The basic layout remained the same: a front-engined, rear-wheel drive Grand Tour with a supercharged straight 8, but displacement grew to 5.4 liters. Off boost, the engine made around 115 horsepower. With the supercharger engaged, power climbed to about 180 horsepower. and top speed crept towards 170 kilometers per hour, depending on bodywork and gearing. To make those speeds usable, the 540K used a 4-speed gearbox with a tall top gear designed for the Autobahn, the new smooth concrete playground that Germany was unrolling across its landscape. On banked tracks, contemporary testers recorded speeds a little over 100 miles per hour, remarkable for a car weighing well over 2 tons. Objectively though, the 500K and 540K were never really drivers' cars in the same way as an Alfa Romeo or Bugatti. Their massive bodywork and stout chassis made them heavy. Off-boost acceleration was lazy, the unassisted steering was extremely heavy at low speeds, and the swing axle rear suspension could bite back with sudden oversteer if provoked on bumpy roads. What they offered instead was presence. The sort of presence that made traffic part like water. Long hoods, towering grills, spare wheels integrated into sweeping fenders, running boards and chrome everywhere. These cars were as much rolling architecture as they were transport. In an era when many luxury chassis were sent to independent coach builders, Mercedes did something unusual. It built most 500K and 540K bodies in-house at its Sindelfingen plant. Customers could choose from a catalog of 8 body types on different wheelbases. There were imposing 4-door saloons, formal limousines, some later turned into armored Action VIP cars, elegant cabriolets A, B, and C, and a handful of motorway couriers and Autobahn couriers with sweeping fastback lines designed for sustained high-speed travel. But above them all, in desirability then, and especially now, sat one shape, the Spezial Roadster. With its endless hood, low 2-seat cockpit, fared-in rear deck, and often twin rear-mounted spare wheels, it looked less like a car and more like a sculpture stretched over a chassis. Only a few dozen of these Spezial Roadsters were built across 500K and 540K production. Estimates put the total somewhere around 2 dozen 540K examples, and almost every one was slightly different. Today, each surviving car is treated like a national treasure when it appears at events like Pebble Beach. Prices in major auctions have reached into the high single-digit millions of dollars. Inside, the experience matched the exterior drama. Deep leather seats, real wood, finely detailed instruments, and a sense that nothing had been left to chance. Even the door locks and indicators ran on a 12-volt electrical system, advanced for the time. You can't tell the story of the 500K and 540K honestly without touching the politics wrapped around them. These were not just toys for neutral millionaires. The 540K in particular became closely associated with the Nazi elite. Senior party members, including figures like Hermann Göring, were known to own and use them. Some examples were built or converted as armored limousines for government and military VIP transport, with thick glass and steel hidden beneath their elegant shapes. Period photographs and later research tie specific 540Ks to officials and events of the era. One famous car, with links to Hitler's Circle, eventually ended up in the United States after the war, touring as part of bond drives before being sold off by the army. Others disappeared for decades, only to resurface in Eastern Europe or private collections. This raises a difficult question that still hangs over some Concours lawns and auction tents today. How do we celebrate the craftsmanship, engineering, and beauty of a machine so closely tied to a regime responsible for immense suffering? Some argue that a car is just a car, a neutral object. Others feel that certain symbols can never be completely separated from the context that created them. The 500K and 540K sit right in that tension. They are both technical and artistic achievements and artifacts of a propaganda-driven era that loved the image of powerful people in powerful cars. The fact that we're still debating them nearly 90 years later says something about how deeply they cut into history. When war finally came, few owners were thinking about Concours trophies or future auction prices. Germany's cities were bombed, borders redrawn, and fortunes erased. Many 500Ks and 540Ks were destroyed, requisitioned, abandoned, or quietly hidden away as priorities shifted from supercharged luxury to survival. Some cars were taken as war prizes by Allied officers and shipped overseas. Others sat in barns, sheds, or crumbling garages for decades, slowly sinking under dust and rust. Their imposing size, complex mechanicals, and politically charged origins made them daunting restoration candidates in the early post-war years. But a few survived in surprisingly complete condition. When serious interest in pre-war classics grew in the 1950s and 60s, collectors began hunting for these cars, especially the rarer roadsters and cabriolets. What had once been symbols of power for a very specific class of owner became slowly and uneasily desirable historic artifacts. By the late 20th and early 21st century, the market had spoken. The 540K Special Roadster, especially in well-documented original or perfectly restored form, was one of the most coveted pre-war cars on Earth. At major concours like Pebble Beach, 540Ks have taken top honors, judged down to the millimeter for panel fit, chrome finish, and authenticity. In recent auctions, individual special roadsters have sold for sums approaching or exceeding $9–10 million, placing them firmly in the ultra blue chip tier of collectible cars. Not everyone is comfortable with that. When a 540K with documented Nazi-era history won Best of Show at Pebble Beach, commentators and enthusiasts debated whether such a car should be celebrated so publicly, no matter how perfect the restoration or how rare the surviving example. And yet, part of why these debates flare up is because the car is impossible to ignore. Its proportions, engineering, and craftsmanship are extraordinary, even by modern standards. It embodies both the best and the most unsettling aspects of its time: ambition without restraint, beauty with a shadow. So what do we do with the Mercedes Benz 500K and 540K today? Are they just museum pieces, stripped of their original meaning? Are they warnings, frozen in metal and chrome? Or are they proof that even in dark times, people will still pour their talent into making something extraordinary, whether or not history approves? Stand next to one in person, and you feel two things at once. You feel the awe, the weight, the craftsmanship, the sheer theater of a car that seems almost too large, too detailed, too dramatic to have ever been practical. And you feel the chill of context, the knowledge that some of these cars carried people and ideas we'd rather keep firmly in the past. Maybe that's why the 500K and 540K still fascinate us. They're not simple heroes or villains. They're mirrors reflecting the contradictions of the 1930s back at us. Economic recovery built on dangerous foundations, progress tied to propaganda, beauty existing alongside brutality. As the rain fades and the engine's echo dies away, the file on the 500K and 540K closes, at least for tonight. But somewhere, under bright concours lights or in a quiet private collection, a supercharged straight 8 waits for another chance to fire, to cough, to howl, and to remind us that history doesn't live only in books. Sometimes, it lives in the sound of a compressor engaging on a night when the world chose not to look away. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing to the Car Story Vault for more slow cinematic journeys through automotive history.